Well, hello and welcome, and thanks for coming to my session here at the fabulous Graph AI Summit. It is a great topic, obviously. I think you would agree with me that AI has achieved celebrity status today, and for good reason. It's really everywhere. I'd like to think of it as not as a separate thing, but rather like security, for example, built into everything we're doing with respect to seeking to achieve better outcomes with our computing and analysis. And I'd like to take you through a little bit of a understanding of where the industry is going. We're applying to industrial, and of course, manufacturing is a big part of the industrial world, as is other types of sub-industries in that domain. And talk to you a little bit about the trends and directions and how we can meet the challenges that are coming upon us in the ever-changing industrial world, as well. And we're seeking to push back the frontiers of confusion and ignorance and complexity, when we seek to get these outcomes in our businesses. And let me quickly thank TigerGraph for inviting me to participate here. I'm very happy to do it. Why am I talking about Industry 5.0 when you might be thinking, well, where's 4.0 and how we really developed that and we're just getting into that? And that is true. And let me tell you philosophically, the big picture why I'm talking about Industry 5.0 is because a good company follows the trends. And the trend today is, Industry 4.0, and a good company will know the trends and follow them. But a great company sets the trends. There's quite a big difference from aggressively following, and also setting. Somebody has to set the trends as well. And this is why I've taken on for my own company and my teams and then the partners that I work with to advance and set trends and be trend setters. And first movers would be a synonym, and a differentiator by being a first mover. And what is the value of that? In this presentation, I'm going to do what's called a segue slide. And this was the format that the great TigerGraph team gave me to achieve a divider slide as well. But I've decided to do some segues. So I'm going to get off the topic a little bit and elaborate deeply. Double click, if you will, chase a rabbit, those metaphors as well. So on a segue slide, I want to talk to you about why is it valuable to set a trend? Why is it valuable to be a first mover? And I have personally experienced four benefits, having been a first mover with teams, leading teams and being part of teams for major new product categories, such as the first smartphone, such as the first laptop computer, such as the first converged edge systems recently with the IoT phenomenon, such as the first converged systems and hyper-converged systems, HCI, as we say, creating new product categories, not just new products. And when you're a first mover, you get early learning over your competition because you're out there learning. By the time they're copying you and on 1.0, you're moving on to 2.0. You can also enjoy higher margin because, again, if you're the sole inhabitant of a market that's good, that's in demand, you can enjoy better margin. And then there's a halo effect. And I've personally, with my teams, enjoyed great accolades in the media with analysts and awards and recognitions that obviously promote and help your company in a true marketing sense. And then a very interesting one is customer trust, because when you come back to that customer who ultimately has to buy what you're offering, you can refer to history and say, you remember when I explained this thing you didn't understand and it was a first mover advantage, and I've got another one, as well. And I've built that relationship with many customers, and I'm very grateful for it. I want to share with you something I call the Team Money chart. This is a chart I created back while I was at another company to understand what's the magnitude of differentiation, how different are we, and also what is the duration, how long will it last before somebody copies it and commoditizes it as well. So you can use this and you can map different types of projects you have. Project A might have a level of differentiation that's very high, but it only lasts 6 months. So if you're delayed your schedules, you might lose that differentiation. Contrariwise, if you look at that, differentiation B has a very long 2-year differentiation, and a lot of this is opinion, right? And you have to consult, as well. But it helps you understand where to invest, right? Like I never invest in something that has a 3-month differentiation, right? And the differentiation is small. I would invest in something that has a very high differentiation, hence barrier to copying, barrier to commoditization, but has a long duration before somebody will get around to it, and we have smart competitors. They'll eventually, get around to it. Okay, I've segued a little bit just to give you a little more as you come to my sessions and my keynotes. I appreciate it. The ancestry of Industry 5.0 is obvious. It's Industry 4.0, and there was a big focus when it started and is now on digital transformation. Everything's smart. And by the way, when you think about smart, you usually think about the fact that it has three C's, what I call the three C's of the edge in IoT. It's smart in the sense that it computes, and that's what I call pervasive computing, right? PC. The second PC is it has perpetual connectivity. Usually smart things are connected. They don't always have to be, especially when there is no connectivity. And then the third one is precision control. It usually prompts or directly, controls something. And cyber physical systems, building in the mechanicals, the mechanics of control with IT, information technology, cyber physical. And Industry 4.0 is characterized by excessive automation. And the term excessive there is somewhat negative, and it's very fascinating to study that. It is a main driver in Industry 5.0, right? We're going to look at the drivers. You also see in the slide a little bit of history that you may already know. What was the Industry 1.0, the first industrial revolution, second and third, all the way up to the fourth. But as I move on and talk about the drivers, the absence of the human due to excessive automation is becoming an issue. Isn't this fascinating? And we're looking at that, those who are thinking advanced. I'm not suggesting this thinking is deployed universally, but remember, a good company sets the trends as opposed to just responds to somebody else, setting them. And also a big focus, which you're very aware of in our culture today, is on physical waste, social waste, and of course, sustainability. And these are some of the drivers of Industry 5.0. Some of the enablers are obvious. Most of them exist today in some form, but they will advance. AI is a great enabler of what's going to take place in Industry 5.0, and I'll elaborate on that as well. And let me say that the focus areas, in the literature today, as you look at it, fall into, I can trifurcate them effectively into three categories. One is human-machine cooperation, and this idea of excessive automation eliminated the human. Now we're bringing the return of the human back, and why? Because the human creativity and sentiment hasn't quite been copied yet by automation. Now you could argue more and more of that will begin. I have a good friend, Amir Hussain of Spark Cognition, who wrote a book called The Sentient Machine, that can think and understand and also create as well. That is happening, of course, but at the end of the day, the idea that we haven't got there yet, let's bring back the human. And one reason we got to bring back the human is for the second focus area of Industry 5.0 called mass personalization, different from mass customization, but beyond the idea of a customer customizing an order, a size, a color, things like that, but the idea that there's a consultative fit. In other words, the consultant, the middle person, or the seller would work to help customize such that it can reduce product fatigue, or getting tired of it, or its obsolescence, as well. So mass personalization is hard to do when you're seeking to in an industrial manufacturing environment, obviously, because you're seeking to optimize, and usually optimization has always been and still is directly related to economies of scale. And you don't get scale when everything's different, right? There's a reason why there are three sizes of drinks usually in a restaurant, right? Small, medium, large. And the reuse, for example, of a particular food in a restaurant that can go in many recipes, you get that point, of course. So this is a challenge, and these focus areas will be challenges. Of course, when I mentioned ESG, diversity, inclusion, social and environmental responsibility, being good stewards of the earth, and with sustainability, and then the idea of upscaling as opposed to just simply recycling. It's in my view, it's a form of recycling, but it's using it for a better purpose, a different purpose, if you will. Instead of the rubber in sneakers being used to make new sneakers, which it can, the rubber could be used for outdoor playground, surfaces, things like that. That's the idea. And that is a little more complex, right? Because I know how to use sneaker rubber for a new sneaker, but how do I use the rubber in a sneaker? And when I say sneaker, I'm talking about a athletic shoe, right? How do I use that in a different application? Well, this is where some of the challenges can be met by by technology, but also by creative thinking. And I think that human element of the creative thinking to apply the technology, the amazing technology that, for example, the Tiger Graph company has, is extremely important. And I don't think that will maximize it by eliminating the human. We will, as the left side of this slide says, need to add the cooperation. Notice how these interact. On this particular slide, I just show how the need for and the re-entry and the return of the human can help us now with how to personalize for other humans who would purchase the product as well. And also the reduction in obsolescence and the reduction in getting tired of the product per se helps, of course, and obviously in sustainability, recycling, and upscaling, as well. So it does all come together. And of course, adding the person does add to the diversity of that person, have different expressions of what they desire due to, obviously, demographic points of view, different spiritual points of view, and different social points of view. We could customize products, for that as well. I was invited, and I want to share with you, to the Next Generation NG Manufacturing Digital Summit. And I was asked to host a panel discussion and report back to the audience and summarize on how to bridge to Industry 5.0. But specifically, the question that I put on the screen here is, what are the models, interfaces, the languages, and what's everything? The organizational structure is very interesting to me. Organizational behavior and human capital, to embrace this idea of Industry 4.0. That's reintroducing the human. Now think about this. Next to machines more, as opposed to abstracted with excessive automation, it is focused on diversity and repurposing or upscaling, right, as well. What's needed, to handle this? And then we have a new generation of workers coming in with completely different sentiments than the extant generation or the older, generation as well, and different values as well. How do we handle this? Well, make a long story short, I had some great people on the panel with me who were in the manufacturing industry. They were in the industrial industry. They had both experience with legacy technologies, and also facing challenges of hiring, the battle for talent, as well. And we portioned it into three categories. There's a challenge with division of labor. What now does the machine do versus the human when we're trying to re-enter the human sentiment into the process? How do we reskill? Because there's new technologies coming, along, as well, including how can we get people to understand more about graph analytics? Not a new technology, but the way the Tiger Graph company has imputed that technology into the industry in new ways and new use cases as well. And then, of course, privacy and safety. Well, if I'm working with machines and all my data is available, who owns it? Who protects it? And how am I going to be safe if I'm in the industrial environment when we're not being asked to be isolated all the time? And it's not always a lights out operation, if you will, meaning no humans there. So those are the categories, as well. So by putting it all together, how are these challenges met? Here come the directions. I portioned into three categories: human machine cooperation, mass personalization, ESG, sustainability, governance, environment. And then they're driving these challenges. These aren't the only challenges, but these are the three ones that came up with my my work group for the NG, Next Generation Manufacturing Summit as well. Well, let me say that I'm going to, before I go on, there's going to be two responses to these challenges, obviously. One is technology, obviously, and we have technology heroes. But I do believe more judgment in people, because the future has no history. You follow that, right? Because what happens new in the history, what happened in history, if it's not replicated in the future, then again, what's going to happen in the future has little data, if you will, right? And so if we're 100% data driven, which we tend in this world, right, of engineering and technology, we tend to brag, I'm data driven, I don't go by emotion as well. That's all fine and good and extremely important, but I would say it's a necessary but not sufficient condition for being a first mover and setting a trend. And here's why: because there's no historic data on a new trend. There is historic data that would cause you to speculate that it would support a new trend. And I always use this story. How many smartphones were sold before the first smartphone? Not a trick question. Zero, right? So we didn't understand it. We can do focus groups, test groups. You can consult with smart people. At the end of the day, though, the empirical data doesn't exist. So you have to use, in addition to being data driven, you must couple it with judgment and vision. And that's why there are so few visionaries being successful today, right? Because to have that correct judgment and to then manifest it with venture capital, manifest it with convincing your company to invest is extremely rare. And that's why we have so few, let me say, so few new product categories being invented, right? Not just new products and new technologies per se, but new product categories as well. So meeting the challenges, I think, is a confluence of what's happening out there at the edge, meaning not in the data center. My definition of the edge is simply it's not the data center. So you walk out of a data center, a room with compute and storage and software and connectivity, of course. You are at an edge, and it might be the street. Yeah, a smart city is an edge. Your home is an edge, right? A manufacturing floor, which we'll talk about a little more here as well, and the connectivity of things that have pent up data ready to be released, like the way the streetlight operates, the way people walk on a sidewalk, right? The way the robotic arm does not quite get to the point efficiently, therefore we could save energy and recalibrate. Everything has data pent up. It's just a matter of tapping it. And then, of course, on top of that, or part of it in the Venn diagram, is the domain we're talking about here, where the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Company, where I work, combined with a ecosystem of partners, which include TigerGraph, we're driving AI and analytics in different ways. And for the interest of time, I don't think I have to explain really the value and the trends in each one of these. So I'll just go quickly through this. But it is interesting to think that in a manufacturing industrial situation, everything is a thing. Now, I know that sounds rather obvious, but the point is the parts, the production, the unit under test, we call the UUT, or the unit under production, is a thing. The conveyor belt's a thing. The robotic arm is a thing. The people, not to trivialize, but the people are things that are working there. They're using equipment and, of course, things such as laptops, smartphones, tablets connected. But also the delivery vehicles are things that are bringing your parts to the manufacturing floor, right? As well. And the ordering systems and the particular forklift that is used in the vehicle to unload the vehicle, load the vehicle, all those things are things. And if they're connected and we can derive the correct data from that physical world, that analog world, amazing things can happen, as well. And one thing I'm gonna segue real quick again. This is a segue, not part of the mainstream, but I'm gonna tell you the 7 benefits of not sending the data to the cloud, the 7 benefits of processing at the edge, as well. So please let me just take you through this. The 7 benefits of processing data at the edge is lower response time if you need real time. And the point here I'm going to get at is we want to get data from these edges, not just in an enterprise, in a data center. We want to get them from the branches where fraud could be taking place during a banking application. We want to get them at all the different manufacturing floors around the world, right? So we can understand an anomaly here and prepare for it there. We can understand a shortage happening here or a surplus happening there and how to manage them as well. So we're lower response time, lower bandwidth utilization, right? If you don't go to the cloud, you're not using bandwidth, and many times the bandwidth may not exist. Also lower connectivity costs. Even if you have the bandwidth, it's not free. It's going to cost, and especially large bandwidth. I'm many times told by my unlimited data plan that my bandwidth will be cut. We'll still have unlimited data, but the bandwidth will be cut, right? As well. Data contained now for security. I was in the UK and they told me I can't have the data leave my manufacturing floor. It must be contained, right? And then, of course, it lowers the duplication of skills. You're not storing all the data at one place and then storing it again as well. And then, of course, I can't even make a cell phone call today without saying, "Can you hear me now?" Right? I mean, here we are in 2020 and different types of policy, geofencing as well. So there's about 7 domains of reasoning why you would want to exploit what's happening at the edge. The edge is where the action is. The data at the edge is older, faster, and bigger than all other types of big data combined. Just think about that. If the data at the edge is all the activity going on as well. So that was a segue. I'm going to come back now. How does technology help us meet these challenges that we've talked about in Industry 5.0? Well, the great TigerGraph company, whose guest I am at this particular session, has advanced graph analytics, and you can learn about graph analytics, and you can even learn a lot about TigerGraph from better people. and other places during this summit. But I would like to say that it does provide a very performance optimized way of using what I would say age-old graph technology. In fact, historically, we can go back to BC, and look at how these types of graphs were used for a couple of reasons I'd like to get into. But again, being able to scale it and understand what would be called many hops, not just 2 or 3 relationships, but how many down the line, many nodes of interrelativity. And because our connectivity in this world has caused us to be a node that is connected to more things than ever before in history, right? Because of our ability to connect and see the internet. Our children have much more connectivity levels to things than ever before when I was a child, as well. And you have to use that and exploit that for analytics, which we'll talk about, a little bit here. So a segue slide. What are the benefits of graph databases as well? Well, there's a schema flexibility in the way you can query and work. I think you already know that. It does provide high performance for both the analytic, but also high performance when the question is very complex, right? And sometimes when you talk with people, right, it takes a long time to explain your question. And I'm not good at that. Sometimes I have to rephrase the question just to get the answer. But those, again, you can see and get quantified in other sessions, during this time. But I'd like to talk about what I call intuitive visualization. Now, when you look at the response to a query, and it is in graphical form, and I have one right here in front of me, you look at that and you say, I think I can understand that the model is connected to a feature map and it's connected to a volume change in some way. It's very, very intuitive, right? And the idea of of these graphic connectivities and a related type of technology, of course, mind maps, as well, helps us in many ways. It speeds learning, right? If a picture is worth 1,000 words, and you can intuitively work with your mind on connectivity, and it can increase retention of what you've learned. It does prompt the connectivity because we think in those terms of relationships. So to see it graphically, at least in this point in a 2D image, and in the future we'll understand better, 3D imagery and complete sensory, perception that will allow us to see it in different ways as well. And I pointed out something very interesting. Remember, I'm on a segue here, that Porphyry of Tyros in the 3rd century BC, he used, I'm not going to say it's called graph theory, but he used the idea of graphs and mind maps to organize the works of the Greek philosopher Aristotle as well. So the Tiger Graph company has taken something proven, which I'm talking about here, and has really kicked it up a notch. To quote Chef Emeril Lagasse, they kicked it up a notch and did it quite well with the ability to scale and the ability to get very high performance, quick answers, as well. Speaking of Aristotle, I like the graph database approach and the visualization associated with the analytics because it supports Aristotle's 4 causes. Now, what are the 4 causes? There's a material cause of something, an efficient cause, a formal cause, and a final cause. My point isn't for you to become an expert in Aristotelian logic or philosophy, but rather my point is to say that this is the way we do think in life, right? And I'm going to give you an example. Watch this. Why is there a wood dining room table? I walked into your house and I said, why is that wood dining room table there? And you could answer, and you can give me the material cause, okay? You could actually say that. You'd say, oh, because wood exists. That's why a table could exist. That's a correct answer, but notice it's not necessarily satisfying to me, or perhaps to you, but it is correct and it has insight into it, right? Say, well, the reason the wood table exists is because wood exists. And we get it from trees, right? Or I can say, no. I mean, why is there a table here? And you say, oh, the reason is the efficient cause, because there's a designer and there was a design and there was an architecture and somebody was smart enough to get a platform and 4 legs, and therefore that's why. No. Really, why is there a table here? Oh, well, the reason the table here is because there's a table manufacturer and the job of the manufacturer of tables is to make tables. That's why I have one. No, come on. Why is there a dining room table here? And, oh, you mean the final cause? Oh, it's to support my food and drinks. Usually we jump to the final cause, right? If I were to ask you, well, what's the table doing here? You might say, well, that's where I put my drink and my food or something else, my lamp or my television or whatever for support as well. But notice if you have insight into some of these other causes, it would help you with the creativity, right? And the creativity is needed in many ways, whether it be human, like we talked about, or whether it be artificial in AI, to create a good recommendation. Because a lot of this comes with recommendations and predictions. And then, of course, the action you should take against them is the next step. But to be able to do that and understand. So that's a couple of insightful segues that I point out. Let's get back to the main topic at hand. How do we meet the challenges of Industry 5.0? We talked about the Tiger Graph contribution to that and the different applications here. Let's look at an example as I wrap up here. This is a supply chain example. I'm speaking to you in the month of May in the year 2022. Do we have supply chain problems or not here, right? I'm personally waiting months for things, right? Especially when it comes to appliances or windows, furniture, whatever the case may be. We have a supply of people issue, of laborers as well. So this is a great thing happening. And when you have to understand your supply chain because it relates to how you can deliver something or receive something if you're the consumer. But if you're the vendor, you're seeking not only obviously when I can deliver and enjoy revenue, because if you don't deliver, according to most accounting laws, you can't book the revenue, but also you're looking to what are the negative effects and how is my pricing strategy going to work? Because if I have to rely on a suboptimal part to ship the product to get the revenue, but I know it fails more, then my warranty costs have to be adjusted. My price might have to be adjusted as well. And there's so many variables, going on with this. So I love this particular application. It's much more deeper than, hey, am I getting my stuff that I ordered? It's much deeper than that, as well. And traditional analytics techniques you may have understood are really incapable of understanding the partner interaction, another connectivity between nodes, right? Another hop, if you will. The route, the protocols, the formats. They're built on relational databases, NoSQL databases. Perhaps those are great, but they do have some performance inhibitors. They have some scale, inhibitors as well. And there are dozens of stages, right? Again, more nodes, more stages to go through, and many levels. It's important, and also many of Aristotle's four causes is important in understanding what's happening here, and impact analysis. Like I said earlier, what happens when the part shows up but it is suboptimal, or I have to make an EC, an engineering change to make it fit, because if I order new ones, it'll be 6 months. I'll miss my launch date. I'll have to reprice everything. On and on and on. So we couple this great technology from our partner, Tiger Graph, with some AI technology that we just recently announced. And I've been happy to be working on the launch of this with some of my colleagues. It is called Swarm Learning, and it leverages operations and supplier information from disparate locations, right? Not just headquarters, not just one factory, not just one supplier in the supply chain. It also uses proven security techniques so that the data does not have to leave the edge. Remember, one of the 7 benefits of computing at the edge is the data can stay at the edge. And there is reason to move it, obviously, for archiving, for legal reasons, for also mapping it against other edge data as well. But there's a lot of reasons to keep it there. And we can then send the insights so we can train the machine learning. That cuts down on the bandwidth. Remember? We talked about in the segue, the 7 as well. So the models can occur of training and recompiling, because if you keep recompiling in the cloud and you send and then you learn new and you have to recompile, a thrashing could take place. And that's a very popular application here for the swarm learning. For example, a factory in Hong Kong can share production and supply insights, not necessarily all the data, right, with a factory in New York, and they can understand where the supply is headed, especially if in Hong Kong might be 6 months ahead in the process. You can learn from that. So, well, by the time I get to month 2, I may have the same problem, as well. And then, of course, that translates to the last line there, that it makes the models much more accurate, much more better, much more valuable as well. So we're beginning to build a stack here. And I'm working on a program called the HPE Industry Stacks program. And we bring to the table with our partners industry expertise. And I'm talking about our expertise we have in manufacturing here, but we also have it in financial, telecom, and others as well. Secondly, we add our AI technology to the top of the stack, but even under lower, we have high performance computing solutions from our Cray brand or Apollo brand that can activate the software that, although defined and maybe use less memory the way the Tiger Graph team has designed it, you still want it executing faster and also, importantly, secure and reliable. So this stack begins to build, as well. And then from that stack, we can understand the answers to many questions associated with this particular use case. And remember, the industry stack brings the industry, manufacturing, in this case, the use case, and in this case, it's supply chain management, and then the partner activation. And we've activated many partners in this solution stack as well. And then we go to market and make that an industry stack. We can talk about, which parts are most at risk. We can find how can I make more efficiency, right? A manufacturer needs to obviously have parts in the supply chain, but also put out as many products as possible. I walked onto the manufacturing floor of a large auto manufacturer. You would know the name, and the number one challenge I was given is, can you help me put out more product? Well, why aren't you putting out more product, right? That would be the name. We get back to Aristotle's four causes. What is the cause for not having more product? Well, the reason I don't have more product is, I can't get more off the line. Well, why? Well, because when I have a problem, it takes a long time to debug. Okay, well, why? Well, because it takes a long time to debug because I don't have standard systems. By the way, this was a real conversation, that I had when we were able to help this customer increase productivity. And also, well, I'm waiting for my supply chain. We go back to that particular problem, right? Because I can't rely on it. All right, let's me just iterate that the way we're going to market is, I would agree, is not a Nobel laureate prize winning idea, but I think you'd agree with me, it's extremely impactful. We take an industry and we hire, grow, and assert our expertise. And like I said, we have them. And so does Tiger Graph, by the way, in financial, as well as manufacturing. And then we take these SMEs, as we call them, the subject matter experts, and we combine that, of course, with what our offering is. And we have collaborative innovation, a term I like to use with our partners on how we can interface. And the Swarm Learning is a separate software product from the Tiger Graph, Graph Analytics product, but we were able to create connectivity and interfaces that it works where 1 + 1 is not just 2, it's greater, than 2 as well. And being able to bring these together and address some of the solutions, not all of them, of course, in Industry 5.0, but address some of the solutions in the future, but also immediately today, has been a great honor and a privilege working with Tiger Graph. So I'd like to just thank you for listening. I hope you might have learned something, tolerating my segues, because I like to do that and add big picture context. Also thanking the Tiger Graph company for this event and for inviting me to be with you today. You can see some of my contact information if you'd ever like to contact me, and I'm happy to discuss and even answer questions. Hope you have a great time here at the summit.